Hello and welcome to our presentation, Leverage Your LMS for Virtual Study Abroad. I'm Maura Devlin. I'm the Dean of Undergraduate Studies at Bay Path University, and I would like my co-presenter to introduce himself.
Thank you. My name is Jacob Schnickel, and I'm an associate professor at GSEN Women's University, and I'm in the Center for Language Education and International Programs.
So in our presentation, we plan to share with you the aspects of our collaboration that you see on this slide. The overview, discussed next, is pretty straightforward. The equation has to do with digitized learning content and a platform for student to student and student to faculty engagement, both with the content and with each other. And it served really as the equalizer. It was the facilitator of our international connections. And finally, we will conclude with best practices, which is really the heart of our presentation because we hope it can inform virtual international exchanges at your institutions. So collaboration between two different women's undergraduate institutions, GSEN Women's University in Tokyo and Bay Path University in Western Mass, that's the project that we're talking to you about today. And in terms of our timeline, there were three components for our project in 2019, but they can be disaggregated, and our focus will be on the second part of our collaboration, the 6-week online course. But prior to that, back in at the point in time when people were still traveling around the globe, students and faculty from GSEN Women's University visited Bay Path, and that was in March of 2019. That was about an 8 or 9 day visit. And then we did conduct, Jake and I together, we facilitated a collaborative accelerated 6-week online course that was asynchronous, at least to Bay Path students, and you'll hear more about Jake's experience with that from his perspective. And this course took place from April to June of 2019. And as I said, this will really be the focus of our discussion today because it really can be a standalone experience without the physical exchanges. But we were fortunate enough last year to be able to bookend the online course with visits. And so the second visit was Bay Path University visiting GSEN Women's University, again for 8 or 9 days in mid-June of 2019. So in the physical exchanges, you can see the distance that each contingent traveled. But in the virtual exchange, through the course experience, students and faculty bridged a 13-hour time difference, native language differences, difference in usage and familiarity with technology, possibly impacted by age differences, and then cultural differences in comfort in asking to interview a high-ranking woman leader, and differences in working styles. So these were the things that our course experience allowed us to bridge. So Bay Path University, I'll just tell you a little bit about my institution. I represent the Adult Women's Division. We have a 20-year history of teaching women in accelerated sessions, 6-week-long sessions. But starting in 2011, we began to put some of our programs online and really went fully into that around 2013, 2014. And we kept the accelerated sessions when we moved online. We have about 1,200 students. And given that they are adult students, the average age is 35. So given our population, there hasn't really been a lot of extracurricular learning opportunities. But the grant that Jake will talk about really provided the inaugural opportunity for the American Women's College Division of Bay Path University to engage in an international exchange. And just a couple other facts demographics about our students. I mentioned the average age is about 35. We have a good percentage of our students who are Pell Grant eligible. So this opportunity really was, a really life-changing, very different type of experience for our students. 40% of our students are women of color, and they come to us with, on average, about 45 transfer credits. So this is the Bay Path context. And next, I'll turn back over to Jake to talk about the GSEN Women's University context.
Thank you, Maura. GSEN Women's University has 2 campuses in Tokyo, one in Shibuya, the busiest part of Tokyo, and one in a suburban area. We have about 4,500 students, most of whom are traditional age students. And that was one of the interesting features of our program, was having a program between students who are a little older, non-traditional students, and 18, 19, 20-year-old students. We have, in the last 10 years at GSEN, been working to expand our international programs, and the collaboration we're talking about today is one of the things that we're most excited about. So next slide. As we have tried to expand our international programs, we've been more active in conferences focused on international education, such as NAFSA. And this is where GSEN and Bay Path met for the first time. I, with a colleague, attended a special interest group meeting for women's colleges and universities, and we met a representative from Bay Path who very excitedly invited us to apply for a program that was being offered by Team Up Japan. I'll talk more about them in a moment. That would allow one faculty member from Bay Path and one from GSEN to study COIL, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, in Japan. And the expectation would then be that the 2 universities would create a hybrid exchange program together. So we applied for that, and we were happy to receive that opportunity. Next slide, please. So Team Up gave us the chance to form a partnership. That's what this organization was all about. Partnerships between American universities and Japanese universities. We received that grant, which was really just for training. We also applied for and received a grant from the Japan-United States Friendship Commission, which gave us some funds that we were able to use for travel, accommodations, and activities. And we're very grateful for both of these opportunities. Next slide, please. Through Team Up, Maura and I were able to meet for the first time at Kansai University, where we studied COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning, with Professor Keiko Ikeda, an expert in this field. We learned the basics. We started talking about our schools and what we hoped to do with this opportunity. And we started to design our course, and Maura will talk more about that.
So as I mentioned, Bay Path had an existing methodology for delivering its courses in accelerated 6-week sessions, had a robust, still has a robust learning management system. Canvas is our platform, and really had developed consistent courses that include discussions among the students and faculty and assignments that are set at consistent due dates and times every week. On top of that, faculty use announcements. Because the course is asynchronous, this is a way and a forum for the faculty to guide student learning throughout the course of the week. And the announcements proved especially helpful in our course because in addition to the 5 BayPath students and the 6 GSEN students who had been part of the exchange, and Jake and me as the faculty members, there were an additional 9 students from BayPath University who were participating in the course, but not part of the exchange. So using the announcements was one way to keep all of the students, even though some of them may have come in with differentiated experiences prior to the course, to make sure that they were all on the same page. So in terms of the course discussions, the BayPath University students are used to doing all of them in all of their courses, so they continue to do all of them. The GSEN students participated in some of the discussions with Jake's face-to-face assistance, and I know he'll talk about that more. But as Jake and I designed the course in advance of running it, teaching it, you know, we built the entire course out in the learning management system. And our courses at BayPath often start with an introductory module. We decided on a video introduction. In this particular case, we had learned from our COIL training that video introductions had been used in some other COIL projects that we were made aware of, and we thought that would be a really interesting opportunity for our students, possibly an out of comfort zone opportunity, but one that we thought would be a good push outside of a comfort zone. As a side note, I will say that sometimes for those who might be used to online discussion boards from a faculty member perspective, it can actually be a little more time consuming for the faculty members to watch all the videos and grade all the videos. It's not, you can't skim the way you can skim readings. So that's a side note. In thinking about the course, the COIL method requires a joint project, but otherwise is not particularly prescriptive. And so Jake and I thought in advance of what we would want to do for the joint project and how we would scaffold student learning to get to that point. So we included course content on cultural competence models, cross-cultural communications. We introduced readings on Japanese and US culture, women in their respective cultures, and we included technology exploration exercises because we knew the use of technology was going to be a way to help facilitate this joint project. And overall, the course's focus was a comparative perspective on women's leadership. And it did involve individual assignments, interviews with a woman leader that each student identified as somebody that she wanted to interview and reach out to and schedule a time and conduct her interview. And so what you see on this slide is a screenshot from the Canvas Learning Management System. This is the group assignment, and you can see we created the final assignment was really a Google slide presentation, one for each group. We broke the students down into 3 groups. And what they were doing, the students were using their individual field notes from their interviews. We provided, again, scaffolded learning activities and readings and exercises to have them think like social scientists as they conducted their qualitative interviews and think of their interview notes as their field notes. And these were the data that they were using collectively in their groups to mine the data to look for themes, 3 to 5 similarities among Japanese and US women leaders, and 3 to 5 differences. And then they worked in groups to elicit those themes and come up with those similarities and differences. And so what you see here is that the learning management system was the venue, the site, really the equalizer in this collaboration. As I said, the COIL methodology required a joint project with actually a shared grade. So everybody in each of the groups, would get the same grade, be graded with the same rubric. The groups brought their field notes together in a Google document, and they also used it as a way to communicate with each other, to identify both a way, like a methodology, a tool, for a live conversation, and the time that they would have a live conversation. And they used this Google document where they put their field notes as a way to analyze their qualitative data. All of the groups did choose Google Hangout, Google Meet as a way for them to connect live. They had to pick the time, 13 hours apart. And then, as I said, their joint presentation was a Google Slides presentation. And they worked on that slide presentation after they had their Google Meet meeting. In that meeting, despite language barriers, time and distance, relative comfort zones and all of that, they did determine how they would work together, who would do what, etc. So they had the live conversation. The final presentation itself in Google Slides was an asynchronous presentation. I will mention that using Google tools for us, the faculty members, had a side benefit, that because we had set up the Google Docs and the Google Meet, working with the students, and the Google Slides for each group, we could see in the history feature that Google tools have exactly who contributed and how much. And though the COIL methodology purpose was that everybody would be graded together using one rubric, there was a particular student on the BayPath side who really hadn't participated, and that was visible to the instructors. But otherwise, everybody got the same grade, and we used the same rubric. But the technology itself provided an interesting bird's eye view on group work to the instructors. So again, for BayPath, the school hosting this learning management system, again, we were using accelerated 6-week courses. The students were experienced to this online learning platform. But these technology tools weren't necessarily new. We have access to them at our institution, but students primarily have been used to Microsoft tools. So transitioning and having them try out Google tools and their collaborative features, and how students were able to ping each other and comment back and forth, that was all really kind of new. As I said, the Google tools were new. Video responses to prompts, it's not something that happens in all of the courses at BayPath. So that was another area where students got out of their comfort zone. And then it was very new to have a synchronous meeting, and especially one across a 13-hour time zone difference. But the students were a bit nervous heading into it, in a good way. The good level of nervous that motivates and excites you made them wonder if they'd be able to do it. They were thrilled, and I'm sure Jake will talk about this more as well. They were thrilled at what they were able to master through this joint project. And now back over to Jake.
Okay, thank you, Maura. So we really like the image of the LMS acting as Maura said, an equalizer. We were on different sides of the equation, and things looked very different between our two sides. So I will talk a little bit about what it was like as the instructor for JISEN students, Japanese students using an unfamiliar LMS, conducting themselves all in English. So unlike Maura and her BayPath students, we did meet face-to-face once a week on Saturdays for 90 minutes. And we used this time as like a staging area to ensure that students were able to perform well when they went into the discussions and they wrote their opinions and they commented on other students' discussion posts. We put the LMS up on a big screen in our classroom. We looked at it carefully. We did have to pick and choose some of the readings. My students did not do everything that the Bay Path students were doing. We did pick and choose which discussions they would answer. And we did this as a class. It was really fun. It felt very productive. And I think it gave students confidence as they left the classroom and did classwork on their own. So next point, please. It was essential for us to invest time in learning how to use the LMS. We had the opportunity to go to Bay Path, and we had a special session dedicated to learning the LMS. Not everyone will be able to do that, but we were able to. Regardless, taking the time to really know how it works is essential. Next point. Like I said, my students, they're good English speakers, but they're not native speakers. And it was really important for us to make sure that the students felt supported in their reading and their writing. I made myself available during those face-to-face meetings to proofread. And I just wanted my students to know that what they wrote didn't have to be perfect. They just had to do their best. And the benefit here, I think, is knowing that they can communicate across cultures in English. This was not a classroom exercise. English was the language of instruction, and it was the language they used to reach across cultures and participate. Next point, please. As I said, I made sure students knew they could contact me with anything. We had a lot of technology going, Google tools, the LMS, and students knew they could reach out to me at any time, and I would help them in any way that I could. I think one more point. One of the great things here is watching my students in Japan support one another. And I write, encourage this. I didn't need to really encourage it. They took care of this on their own, but it was a really wonderful feature of this type of class, the many ways that they were able to support their peers. Okay, and I think the next slide. So we'll talk about best practices, and we're going to look at first design, and then second, implementation. And we'll look at a few points for each one of these. So on the design side, our whole presentation has really been focused on this image of an equation. And it's really important, we feel, to acknowledge that each side is going to look very different. The Bay Path participation was quite unlike the GSEN participation. And that was great because we met on the LMS and we did great work together. Next point, please. It's essential to investigate the logistics of using your LMS to host international students. When I met the Bay Path representative at NAFSA, she knew that they would be able to use their LMS, and it made it very easy for her to invite us. Please come join us in this special opportunity. We're able to host you on our LMS. So if you're going to do something like this, what's involved? What would you have to do to be able to have international students on your LMS? Next point. One of the challenges for Maura and me was aligning our school calendars. They have a 6-week accelerated schedule, and we have a traditional 15-week semester. We sat down, we looked at it carefully, and it worked really smoothly, but this is an important point. Next point, please. So the linguistic abilities, differences in linguistic abilities, we talked about this. It's inevitable for my students. This was, as I mentioned before, a unique opportunity to use English, not to study it, but to use it and just prepare for these challenges. That's an important point, we feel. Next point, please. In our course design, we planned opportunities for both the US students and the Japanese students to speak knowledgeably about their own experiences and their own cultural context. Even though the language, there were language differences, we felt that it was important to give each group to express their own expertise and their own experience, and we built that into the course design. Next point. We thought it was important to standardize some aspects of the course so that students' attention and focus would go into the areas that we really wanted them to concentrate on. One example is the final project. We set up a structure that we asked all students to follow, and this allowed them to just focus on their content and not worry too much about the form that it would take. Next point, please. So on the implementation side, be ready to help troubleshoot any tech issues, but at the same time, we thought it was great to let students figure things out on their own. And this is one of the byproducts of having an international collaboration. Students will find workarounds. There are so many tech tools out there. Students know things that we don't know. And it was fun to watch students figure things out on their own. Next point. So we put students in groups strategically. I think our unique circumstances allowed us to think about how to pair GSEN students with BayPath students who had actually met. Not everyone will have that, but I do think we do feel that grouping for the best possible cooperation is really important. Next point. So again, this peer support, I say encourage. We did not have to do much of that. I'm repeating myself, but there's no way to overstate how great it is to watch students reach out and help each other complete a group project. So this peer support is just a wonderful aspect of this kind of collaboration. Next point.
And I'll just add that that didn't only hold true for younger traditional age students. The peer support, among the adult women was essential as well. And younger student to older student to younger student support. The peer support really was invaluable.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's really true. Maura mentioned this earlier, but it's really important to monitor student participation through the tools that you're using, through the LMS, through Google Slides, just to make sure that no one slips through the cracks, and that if anyone does seem to be not participating, an instructor can reach out to that student to find out what's going on. Maybe one final point here. So the visiting students, that was the GSEN students. They were in an unfamiliar LMS, an all English environment. And I think one of the reasons this was a successful collaboration was that we had great support and preparation with the LMS before the course even started. And I would say that's an essential point. So that's it for our presentation. We are happy to respond to questions at the JALT conference and also by email if you would like to connect with us there.
Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Thank you.